looking at the crisis in Venezuela, particularly that which began after April 19th, it's important to look behind the headlines. It's important to understand both the economic context of what's happening in Venezuela, but also the social and political context. If we were to look at the U.S. press, particularly the New York Times, LA Times, or even the other print or media, we would get the impression that Venezuela is a country beset by protest against the government. And while it is true that there have been significant and important protests against the government, there's also been protests in favor of the government. So that hardly gets represented in the U.S. press. On the very same day, April 19th, in which the headlines in the U.S. declared massive protests against Nicolás Maduro, there were also massive protests in favor, not necessarily just of Maduro, but of the social changes that have taken place in Venezuela. So in that context, I think it's very important to get beyond the headlines and to understand and to look at and to read Latin American perspectives and to be able to decipher what is actually going on in the region. Not just Venezuela, but what is going on in Mexico, what is going on in Brazil or Argentina or other countries in the region. Latin American studies is a critical tool for the interpretation and analysis of what is occurring in the region. In the case of Venezuela, one needs to look to the economic situation. One needs to look at the near total dependence on oil, that even despite 16 years of social change has not really fundamentally altered. The reality is that Venezuela continues to depend on oil for the majority of its foreign reserves. It also is a country that imports the majority of its food products. It has imported the majority of its food products since 1935, when it became a net importer of food. That permits then for tremendous levels of manipulation in the economy and distorts the economy in multiple ways. That does not excuse at all the shortages that are taking place in the country. That does not excuse at all the missteps on the part of the Maduro government, but it does speak to the larger structural problems the country faces. The real question we have to ask ourselves is, what is the proposal, or what is the offer on the part of the opposition to replace Maduro? There has to be deeper questions asked in terms of what is the opposition proposing. So far, we have not seen any. On the part of the government, we have seen important social changes. The life of most Venezuelans did improve significantly over the last 16 years. Some of those gains have been reversed in the last couple of years, given the rising inflation, the food scarcities, and we've seen a return of some levels of poverty. But nonetheless, we have to rescue what were the positive developments that occurred during this period, and at the same time understand what were some of the severe mistakes in terms of bureaucratization, in terms of hyper-presidentialism, in terms of the unwillingness to actually tackle the larger economic issues. The reality is that for Venezuela to go forward, it has to wean itself off of oil. It has to dramatically tackle the dependence on oil, and it has to challenge some of the dominant paradigms that have existed in the country. It's not sufficient to continue relying on oil because that will simply recreate the conditions that we're seeing in Venezuela today. So again, I urge you to go beyond the headlines. I urge you to understand the dynamics that are taking place in the country. I urge you to read Latin American perspectives and stay abreast of all the changes that are occurring in the region. Thank you very much.